Chapter 33. Page 382. Time drifted along until the early part of July without any further attack by the enemy, but Supreme Commander Gordon believed that they would make another attack soon before giving up. He was simply watching and waiting, biding his time. The United States Army scouting planes reported that the enemy scouts were going out more frequently each night, and some of them had been seen 50,000 or 60,000 feet in the air. They thought that they were getting ready to make another attack and were trying to get a line on what the United States forces were planning to do. The Supreme Commander went to Washington to test out the Demon of Death, which had been installed in the Capitol building, and found it in good working order. A sleeping gas distributing machine and the tunnel machine had been set up there, and he also tested them out. In view of the splendid work done by Colonel Edna Kenilworth at the time of the attack on New York City, Supreme Commander Gordon decided to send her to Washington and put her in charge of the sleeping gas distributing machine, the Demon of Death, and the tunnel machine. He instructed her that if an attack came upon Washington, she was not to use the Demon of Death unless the sleeping gas failed or they failed to get the enemy aviators into the tunnel through the air. He believed that if attack came upon Washington, it would be the last and end the war. Because his country had ever stood for love and liberty, if its capital was attacked, he wanted it to be saved by a bloodless victory. It would mean much to the United States in future years if the seat of government could be protected without taking the life of one of the enemy. With the tunnel machine in New York, another one in Cincinnati, and a third machine in Washington, D.C., he would be able from New York City to place a tunnel through the air in every direction around Washington to capture the invading army of planes. Colonel Edna Kenilworth said that she thought he was placing on her shoulders a great responsibility, but that if he had confidence in her, she would go and do her best. He told her that she could not fail and that there was nothing to fear. That it would be much easier now to protect Washington than it was New York from attack. So Colonel Edna Kenilworth went to Washington. She arrived there on July 2nd, and did not have long to wait before seeing action. Battle of Washington. The enemy was losing confidence and decided to risk 50,000 planes, the best that they had, on a concerted attack upon Washington. They figured that if they could take the capital, it would be a telling blow and help them on to further victory. This was to be a supreme test, and they decided to make the attack in broad daylight because they thought it would be a surprise and there would be more people on the street, and the attack would have a greater demoralizing effect on the people throughout the country. July 4th, Independence Day, was the time selected for the attack. The plan was to send one fleet up the Potomac, have another fleet come down the Potomac from the north and northwest, and the third wing come across by Baltimore. Colonel Edna Kenilworth was on duty when the tel-talk buzzed and a scouting plane reported to her that the enemy were approaching in large numbers up the Potomac. She had never operated the sleeping gas machine in daylight before, but knew that it would work just as effectively. Having seen the attack upon New York and knowing how swiftly one attack followed the other, she realized that she must work fast. She adjusted the gas machine toward the enemy approaching down the Potomac and set it for a certain range, about 75 miles. She looked through her telescope and saw the enemy when they were about 50 miles away and decided to let go the sleeping gas. She swept it quickly right and left, and in the glistening sunshine saw hundreds of planes going down. In 15 minutes the entire fleet was safely asleep in the tunnel through the air. By this time report came that another fleet was making from Baltimore in a direct line for Washington. She set the machine again, looked through her powerful glass and saw the enemy approaching. She started discharging the gas, and in 12 minutes the entire fleet had been plunged into the tunnel. She had a few minutes to wait and immediately picked up the radiophone and told Supreme Commander Gordon in New York that the sleeping gas machine had worked wonderfully and that the tunnel through the air held in captivity thousands of the enemy's airships and planes. Almost before she had finished making her report, the tel-talk buzzed. She ran to it and was informed by the scouting planes that the largest fleet of planes ever seen was approaching from the west and northwest. Knowing that this was a combined fleet from the enemy's western lines, from the same direction as the final one that attacked New York City. This was to be the supreme test. The first formation approached with about 1,000 planes. Swiftly and silently, the gas machine did its work and they went down into the tunnel. Then came the second, third, and fourth formation and so on. More than 50,000 planes had gone down and not more than 1 hour's time had elapsed. When it was over with, Edna realized that she had not been a human being during this ordeal, that she had worked just like the machine, forgotten everything but the responsibility for the protection of her country. When she knew that the capital of her beloved country was safe and that more than 50,000 of the enemy's airships were safely suspended in the tunnel through the air and that the aviators had entered upon their 7-day sleep, she was supremely happy because not one life was required to save the capital. It was the greatest victory of all history thus far, and she knew what it meant to Supreme Commander Gordon and how this victory would be hailed with rejoicing all over the United States. It would relieve the tension which had existed for 2 years when every hamlet, town and city had feared every night that they might be attacked and destroyed by bombs from the enemy's planes. The news had been flashed to all the departments and Army headquarters. When the scouting planes reported that more than 50,000 planes had been captured in this attack and not one of them escaped, the President and Army officers breathed a great sigh of relief and knew that this meant certain victory for the United States because the enemy had concentrated their attack on New York and Washington with their best planes, and had very few large bombing planes left, and if this was not the end of the war, it was the beginning of the end. The President and his cabinet rushed to the Capitol building to congratulate Colonel Edna Kenilworth. They found her carefully powdering her nose. By this time she was calm and collected and prepared for the unexpected reception, but was overwhelmed with the suddenness of the arrival of high officials. She had met the President before when he had come to New York after the Great Battle. He was the first to grasp her hand and, after kissing it, told her of the great debt of gratitude her country owed her. The President said, "Your great service demonstrates that woman is the equal of man, and I hope to live to see the day when a woman will be President of the United States. This country owes to you and Supreme Commander Gordon and your good husband, Colonel Kenilworth, its liberty and freedom. There is nothing too good for you. You have performed the greatest act of any woman in history. I speak for the American people and extend their heartfelt gratitude. We can never repay you." Colonel Edna Kenilworth thanked the President, told him that she had only done her duty and that she felt any other good woman in the United States would be glad to do the same under the same conditions. The President and members of his cabinet were greatly impressed with her modesty and expressed their pride that one so young in years possessed such skill and daring. She told them that this was imperative and that there was no one else who knew how to handle the sleeping gas machine except Supreme Commander Gordon and Colonel Kenilworth, and that she had been placed there for that purpose and had only done her duty. Supreme Commander Gordon in New York sent a simple message congratulating Colonel Edna Kenilworth. "You're a real woman, a thoroughbred. I knew you could do it." The President and the War Council met and voted that a message of congratulation and appreciation be sent to Supreme Commander Gordon, telling him that everything would be left in his hands and to proceed as he had in the past. The President and other government officials asked him if he would not give his consent to permit all of the newspapers in the United States to publish the details of the attack upon New York and how it had been successfully defended, and to give details of the great victory at Washington. They felt that the people had so long been in a state of fear and anxiety. This would bring great relief and give them a chance to get some peaceful sleep, because it would remove from their minds the fear of their cities and towns being destroyed. Give them confidence that the United States had proved equal to the occasion. Help the general business situation and bring comfort to thousands of people who were suffering. Supreme Commander Gordon replied that there was no question but that the war was won and that need for secrecy was no longer necessary. On the afternoon of July 4, the President of the United States issued a proclamation to the people, telling them of the wonderful victory in Washington and assuring them that the country was safe, and set aside the following 3 days as holidays to celebrate and commemorate the victory of Independence Day. In his message he said that God had blessed the stars and stripes and given to America a lone man who had made inventions which had saved the country, and that a lone woman, Edna Kenilworth, with these inventions had protected Washington from destruction and captured over 50,000 of the enemy's airships without causing the loss of a single soul. The President's proclamation was given to the newspapers, and every paper in the United States carried big headlines. Great attack on New York and Washington fails. More than 100,000 of the enemy's airships have been captured. Hundreds of thousands have been taken prisoners. Edna Kenilworth, A lone woman saved Washington with sleeping gas bagged over 50,000 airplanes, which are now safely held in the tunnel through the air made by Supreme Commander Gordon's great invention. It is expected that the enemy will make a plea for peace any day. When the President declared a holiday, Supreme Commander Gordon decided that this was the time to let the enemy know what our strength was, as it was no longer necessary to keep the secret about our new wonderful inventions. He ordered the invisible noiseless planes to load up with hundreds of thousands of newspapers which told of the great victory, sail at great altitudes over the enemy's lines in the United States and bombard them with these newspapers. He ordered Colonel Morrison and Colonel Manson to take charge of the planes which were to distribute the papers over the enemy's lines. Ordered them to sail over the city of Mexico and distribute papers over the enemy's headquarters there. The Supreme Commander felt that this was the end. In fact, he knew it, because after reading over Ezekiel again he saw that the prophecies were about all fulfilled and that in a short time the millennium would dawn and the world would be at peace. He read chapter 10, 9 and 21. And the cherubims lifted up their wings and mounted up from the earth in my sight. When they went out, the wheels were also beside them, and everyone stood at the door of the east gate of the Lord's house. And the glory of the God of Israel was over them. Everyone had 4 faces apiece, and everyone 4 wings. And the likeness of the hands of a man was under their wings. And the glory of the Lord went up from the midst of the city and stood upon the mountain, which is on the east side of the city. He knew that this was the glory referred to for the United States, and that Ezekiel's prophecy, chapter 14, 21st verse, had been fulfilled. It reads as follows. For thus saith the Lord God, how much more when I send my 4 sword judgments upon Jerusalem, the sword and the famine and the noisome beast, and the pestilence, to cut off from it man and beast. He knew that the noisome beasts were the airplanes, and that all of these things had happened. He read again about the 7 days when they should prepare and purge the altar and purify it and consecrate themselves. He now knew that the time was coming when the Lord should rule on earth as he had promised, and war should be no more. The prophecies of the Bible had been fulfilled where it said that woman should be the equal or exalted above man. The Lord had said, I will exalt the low and debase the high, and the Bible said, the little ones shall become as 1,000. He was happy to know that everything was working out just as he had predicted it, and happy because his inventions, which he had worked on so unselfishly, had saved his devoted country and made the nations of the world realize that all power under heaven and earth was given unto the United States, the land of liberty. Knowing that the great power was now in his hands alone, he could proceed to destroy every living thing in every nation, but his heart was full of love and mercy, and only through mercy and without selfishness could the United States set an example to the world. He could retake the Pacific coast, wipe out the western lines of the enemy, or put them all to sleep for 7 days and then make peace on any terms that he might dictate. He thought of all the rulers of the world, from the tyrant Nero down to the Kaiser, how each one had sought world dominion based on selfish greed, and each one had failed because God would not sanction such rulership. He thought of Marie, and as he dreamed of her, forgot whether he was a man with Caesar or a god with Alexander. Not once was he tempted to use the great power within his hands, for he knew that love was kind and merciful. All the writings of St. Paul had put stress on love and charity. He decided that women and children must be protected and that not one of their lives should be taken in this final conflict. Now that the end was near, he must demonstrate in a way never to be forgotten the power that he held over the world, and decided to use the sleeping gas.